Who destroyed their entire life by making one mistake? Boban Jankovic, basketball player, copied from Wikipedia. Jankovic thought he scored a basket on a drive to the hoop while being guarded by Panathinaikos player Fragiskos Alvertis. However, the referee, Stelios Koukoulakidis, called an offensive foul on him. It was Jankovic's fifth foul of the game, which meant that he had fouled out. In reaction to what he believed was a bad call at a crucial moment of a very important playoff game, Jankovic slammed his head hard against the padded concrete goalpost. He permanently damaged his spinal cord and was unable to walk for the rest of his life. What? Yikes, that is not what I expected. I can't even begin to imagine the amount of regret he must have experienced. Anger management, folks. Story 2. My father. Years ago, he started a trucking company with his best friend at the time. The HQ of the company was in a neighboring state, a 6-hour drive or about a 40-minute flight. For some reason, my dad just wouldn't visit his company. Even with my mother pressing him to actually take care of his business, he would always say he trusted his friend, and since he only did the accounting for the company, he only needed the reports his friend would send him. Long story short, his quote-unquote best friend scammed him out of $1 million, driving both their company and my family to complete bankruptcy and screwed off to live in some tropical paradise. And that's why you need to hold on to at least enough cash to have the man terminated in a foreign country. Story 3. Near me, there was a serious traffic collision, several cars and 2 trucks. 3 people passed away when one truck plowed into stationary traffic at around 50 miles per hour. The crash and resulting fire was so horrific. It was on the BBC News, and there have been documentaries about it. The truck driver, he was on his phone, he was charged and is now in prison. Story 4. When I was a kid, there was a family down the street with 3 small children. The parents had a fairly ugly breakup, and the mom ran off with her new boyfriend. Every single time she dropped the kids off at his house for visitation, the drop-off devolved into a screaming match in their front yard. One day, she shows up to drop off the kids with her boyfriend. Boyfriend and dad got into a shouting match, and the boyfriend punched the dad, laying him out on the front lawn. The boyfriend and mom then jumped in their car and took off. A moment later, the dad came to, hopped in his pickup truck, and floored it out of his driveway in pursuit. Not sure what he was planning to do, but he wasn't going to let them get away. He didn't realize that his 3 children were standing behind the pickup when he threw it into reverse and floored it. All 3 were gone. He spent a decade in prison and lost everything he had. Worst part is, all of the stories that came out said that he had been a great dad and wasn't at fault in the breakup. Mom had got herself on substances while trying to lose weight, and the boyfriend was her new dealer. He was a good guy who got stuck in a crappy situation and then made one horrific mistake. Story 5. I ran into a former middle school football teammate at Walmart a couple years ago, and he gave me an update on his life. In 7th grade, he was considered an up-and-coming prospect locally. He was a defensive end, a big guy, nice guy overall, didn't do substances, stayed out of trouble, got good, decent grades. In the 90s, for some strange reason, pantsing was a big thing. I don't know why, but it was hilarious to run behind someone and pull their pants down. It happened a lot. I myself was pantsed a couple of times. It was stupid, but it really was a trending thing. Anyways, one day while we were running our football cross-country run on a long path that circled the school out to the wooded area, we ran by a couple of girls from the track team sharing the path. A different player dares the lineman to pants one of the girls. The idiot does. He reacted so quickly, I couldn't even tell him not to. It was like seconds. Well, this girl was the daughter of a lawyer. As he ran away laughing, she was screaming at the top of her lungs that she was mistreated. I remember the police showing up and handcuffing him, and I thought to myself, wow, why are the police here? It didn't occur to me at that age what was happening at all. I thought it was a prank that she just didn't like. He was arrested, convicted, and spent the rest of his teenage years in juvie. When I bumped into him at Walmart, he was picking up shopping carts. I had forgotten all about him and that whole situation. He started to tell me that after juvie, he was marked for life, a registered offender. He couldn't get into college, he couldn't find work. He lived in public housing and Walmart was his first job, but he had a lie on his application. He begged me not to mention his past to anyone there because he was about to end it all before he landed this job. He said that every day he goes to sleep and remembers that prank, and every night he considers ending it all for it. That crap hit me so deep. Thousands of pants were pulled down that school year, and this dude picked the absolute worst person to target for a cheap laugh. After he was arrested, I remember all the pantsing stopped instantly, and the kids moved on to hitting people in the chest and yelling, "Open chest." Story 6. Dennis Rader, the BTK serial criminal. He avoided arrest for 30 years, then, in an apparent need for attention, he began writing to the police, basically mocking them for never having caught him. He asked the cops if they would be able to trace a floppy disk if he sent one to them. They said no. He sent it, they traced it, they arrested him, and he's in prison for life. What's particularly interesting is that the evidence obtained from the floppy was only circumstantial evidence, i.e., it wasn't enough to justify a search warrant, let alone an arrest. However, once they had Dennis Radar on their radar, they obtained a warrant to obtain DNA from his daughter's pap smear test, which apparently had familiar DNA matches to DNA obtained from one of Radar's victims, suggesting that the DNA obtained from the victim likely came from a close family member of Radar's daughter. Obviously, it came from Radar himself. Story 7. Friend was having a beer in a tavern. Some guys came in and started messing with my friend. He moved seats twice and then got up to leave when one of the guys threw a punch. My friend threw one back and the guy he hit landed in the ICU and wasn't expected to live. Friend was sitting in jail just waiting for the guy he harmed to either pass away or recover. Turns out the guy he punched recovered. Friend took a reduced charge. One punch. Story 8. I'm 49 years old and that context is relevant. When I was in college, a friend of mine started a company with a professor. This company was basically the first social network. I won't list its name here. This was in the early 90s. He offered me a job as employee number 4 or 5. I didn't know what the hell the internet was, let alone understand the concept of a social network. I knew he wasn't going to pay me much. I turned him down. 3 years later, the company was sold for $190 million. They still only had a few employees. Every employee had equity, and every employee made millions by age 25, including several other friends. I was a junior employee at an insurance company when I heard. Ugh. Several of those people have gone on to very successful careers in technology and private equity. They were all basically set for life because of a quick decision they made at age 21. I've had an excellent career so far. I haven't destroyed my life, but I think about this frequently. Story 9. The daughter of a friend of my mom. This was quite a few years ago, but coma drinking was, for whatever insane reason, really popular with the youth here. And yes, it is exactly what the name implies. You drink until you black out. She actually did go into a coma and, from what I understand, suffered minor brain damage. Story 10. Gabriel Rivera, football player drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was going to be the new anchor on a defense trying to replenish itself. Halfway through his rookie season, he crashes his new car while going something like double the speed limit while intoxicated. He lived, but he was paralyzed for the rest of his life. Story 11. Henry Ruggs II. The dude is an all-star, first-round pick wide receiver playing in the NFL, top 1% of the 1% in professional sports. Not only did he have the fame, but he was lining up to make millions and millions of dollars being the star in the most-watched sport in American culture. He drinks and drives, crashing his new Corvette into an innocent woman at a stoplight with her dog. The car bursts into flames, trapping her and the dog. A person passed away, a dog passed away, because he drank and drove. He's lucky his girlfriend, who was a passenger, and he didn't pass away. Now he lost his NFL contract and is in jail. What's crazy is we all know how inexpensive Uber rides are, especially when you're a millionaire, or how the league literally provides free transportation for these types of scenarios. Incredibly poor judgment caused a person to lose her life, and he to go from literally living the high life to being behind bars. Story 12. Alexei Petrovich Tsarevich of Russia. In 1716, he fled to the Austrian Empire in order to escape his father. When emissaries sent by his father came to bring him back to Russia, he returned on the condition that he would not be harmed. This was the worst mistake he ever made. It resulted in him being implicated in a treason plot and ultimately cost him his life. This is an extremely brief summary on this topic, obviously. Some people would say Alexei choosing to run away was the mistake that destroyed his life. It is also unclear whether he plotted against his father or not. Ultimately, it is one of the most tragic moments in the history of the Russian Empire. Story 13. Not as bad as others, but my life, currently. Let my father-in-law move in with us from out of state. He wanted to reconnect with my husband, made all of these promises, moved in, had to get a bigger house that we cannot afford on our own. He helps pay the mortgage, because we discovered he is a compulsive hoarder. He's taken over the house with his BS junk. He's absolutely crazy, won't clean up after himself, is a mess, can't force him out. It would financially ruin us. I can't live with him either. It's a freaking nightmare. We're trapped. Story 14. My brother, he had a great life ahead being a rugby player. He was extremely close to playing in our country's team. He chose the wrong girl to love. Her father wasn't very happy with my brother and arranged for her to marry a random guy. Her father accused my brother of mistreatment. She was 2 years older than him and also both over 21 years old. It was a big thing and basically just destroyed his career before even starting. Years of hard work and sacrifice down the sink. That witch convinced my brother to run away with her, only to meet a few days later the guy she was supposed to marry. She liked him and realized he is extremely rich. She didn't tell my brother, and he waited for her for a few weeks. After he finally contacted her and found out everything, he just broke down, got into substances, and every kind of problem existent. From the best player in his league to a thief in like 1 or 2 months. I've seen her recently in the town I moved with 2 children, and she just came to me and asked how my brother was and how sad she is about the situation 6 years later, but how happy she is with the luxury life she chose. I slapped her. I regretted it only because her kids were there. Story 15. Breon Taylor was the first overall pick in the 1991 MLB draft by the New York Yankees. This guy had all the makings of a perennial ace and potentially a Hall of Famer. He had a blazing 100-mile-per-hour fastball to go along with great breaking pitches. He was a pitching coach's dream. To start his professional career in 1992, Taylor enjoyed his finest season, pitching a 2.57 ERA with 187 strikeouts and 106.1 innings of work. By 1993, Taylor emerged as the second-best prospect in the game, according to Baseball America, behind only future Hall of Famer Chipper Jones. Big things were in his future. He was a superstar and lived up to the already sky-high expectations. On December 18, 1993, Taylor was injured while fighting on behalf of his brother Brendan in a fistfight. The New York Times reported that Brendan confronted a man named Ron Wilson, who he had fought with in Harlow, North Carolina. Brendan suffered injuries during his fight with Wilson. Once Breon discovered his brother had been hurt, he and a cousin went to Wilson's trailer home to confront him. There, Taylor got into an altercation with Jamie Morris, Wilson's friend, and Taylor fell on his shoulder, causing substantial damage. When the Yankees made arrangements for Taylor to visit Dr. Frank Jove, he called the injury one of the worst he'd seen. The following week, the doctor performed surgery to repair tears in the capsule and glenoid labrum of Taylor's shoulder, which caused him to miss the entire 1994 season. Taylor returned to baseball in 1995 and spent the season with the rookie-level Gulf Coast Yankees. When he returned to action after surgery, he had lost 8 miles an hour off of his fastball and was unable to throw a curveball for a strike. Taylor would never come back from his injury, posting horrible season after horrible season until he retired in 2000. His arm was completely gone. After retiring from baseball, Taylor moved to Raleigh, North Carolina with his 5 daughters and worked as a UPS package handler, then worked as a beer distributor. By 2006, he had moved back home and was working as a bricklayer with his father. In March 2012, Taylor was charged with substances after undercover agents purchased a large quantity from him over a period of several months. He was federally indicted in June 2012. Taylor pleaded guilty in August 2012 and was sentenced to 50 months in prison, followed by 3 years supervised release. He was released on September 12, 2015. Story 16. I did. I trusted someone I met online. I fell in love. She lived in another country, and I made plans to go there to be with her. I got rid of my home and all my worldly possessions. Just before actually leaving here to be with her, she had a change of heart. All my friends warned me about doing such a foolish thing, but I ignored them. I haven't been able to recover ever since, mentally, physically, or financially. It's taken such a toll on my state of mind. Story 17. Our 2 neighbors were up on the roof of their camper fixing it, and one sent the other one down to grab his pack of cigarettes. He grabbed them and reached way up, indicating to the guy still up there that he should reach for them, which he did. As soon as his hand got close enough, the guy on the ground took them away like psych, totally just teasing him. It startled the guy on the roof, causing him to lose his balance. He fell off the roof of the camper and passed away almost immediately. All of us neighbors were standing around watching. It happened in front of everyone and no one could stop it. It all happened so fast. Split-second decision ruined multiple lives at that moment. It was so tragic. I don't remember the fall even though I saw it, probably trauma-blocked it. But I absolutely remember the guy on the ground manic pacing and crying and screaming, trying to get his friend to wake up. Story 18. My cousin was an incredibly successful businessman in the late 90s, early 2000s. He decided to do business overseas as he had never done that before. He met a couple of Japanese businessmen and had a back and forth over a few months, and they hatched a business plan, etc., where they would put up 50% and so would he. He got sold off of his businesses, remortgaged his home, and asked his parents if they would do the same, promising to pay them back after the first year's profits. They trusted him as he had a great track record. Long story short, he never heard from the 2 Japanese businessmen again. He lost all his money, his parents lost their house, and they will now have to work until they pass away. Worst of all, his wife was so hurt due to going from a life of luxury to a life pinching every penny. She concocted a plan and essentially claimed he mistreated his daughters to destroy him. He was never convicted as it was essentially his word against hers, but there was zero evidence to back anything up. Unfortunately, rumors like that make it incredibly hard to get a job or get anyone to trust you. He developed a drinking problem and can barely function as a human being. Last year, I saw him and he's doing okay, but lives with his parents and is slowly rebuilding his life. His kids have started visiting him and he loves that, but his entire life will never be the same. Story 19. There was a confrontation at a local fast food spot. Simple enough, two guys parking their cars, nothing spectacular. One guy gets out of his car and accidentally dings the door of the other guy's new Mustang. Mustang driver gets out all angry and throws a fit. Accident guy was very apologetic, admitted it was an accident, offered insurance, offered to pay for the buff, and was trying his best to keep things calm. But Mustang guy took a swing and knocked him out. There were roughly 30 witnesses. The cops are called and an ambulance arrives. Mustang dude gets to the PD and there are news crews there to take info on the incident. Mustang guy, stupid meathead, is all smug and thinks this is just a dumb confrontation. But then the news gal says, "How does it feel to know you just ended a man?" He had no idea. His smile quickly turns to dread. Turns out accident guy was a young dude who just graduated medical school and was on his way to becoming a pediatrician. He came to the local area from a larger city to help the community he was raised in, came from a poor family, went to school, and was somewhat of a local hero. There was a whole news article about him just a few days prior with excitement and hype about his arrival. He had a wife and two younger children, the picture-perfect family. Mustang guy's lawyer tried to push for a reduced charge. I'm no expert, but witness accounts of his unprovoked aggression, previous charges, bar fights, public outrage, the judge, the DA, and ultimately the jury disagreed and charged him. He earned a life sentence for a $30 ding in a Mustang door panel. Story 20. I was 19, a student in uni and just entering my second year of post-secondary. I was dating online a lot and liked the company of guys older than me. For context, I was overweight and guys my age didn't even look my way, but guys 27 plus sure did. Anywho, I started going out with someone who was 38, 17 years older than me. To make a long story short, he was a master manipulator, a drinker, and a user who had done 7+ years in prison, was in the middle of a divorce and had a daughter 4 years younger than me. Be very careful who you associate with, no matter how smart you think you are. He turned me into someone I didn't recognize. I had to deal with 1.5 years of court and PTSD from all I endured. Yes, I thought it was all for fun, until I was so deep in that life, I had to crawl out. Story 21. The mayor of a small town near my city, he decided to close the local health center down to save on costs, and for everybody in town to drive to the nearby city, as it has a proper big hospital and all. This country has a decent free healthcare system. Shortly after, he finds himself on the receiving end of cardiac problems and does not make it to the hospital in the nearby city. It gets even worse. He was re-elected but passed away after the election and before taking possession of the charge. So the elections had to be had again. It was planned to be had right when the frickin' lockdown started. You just can't make this stuff up. Story 22. Brandon Brown. He didn't ruin his career, but the announcers did. During a NASCAR Xfinity Series race, the crowd was chanting, "Screw Joe Biden," and the announcers, trying to make it more of a family-friendly affair, said that they were cheering for Brandon Brown by saying, "Let's go, Brandon." The phrase became synonymous with "Screw Joe Biden," and Brandon lost all sponsorship and eventually his ride. He has not raced in a very long time because some fans decided to bring politics into a sporting event. And if you're learning a thing or two from this video so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 23. This happened to a friend of a friend in the small town where I live. My friend, male 14, and his two friends, male 13 and 14, were riding around on an ATV doing donuts along the bank of the lake near my town. Male 13 was driving and my friend and 14 were passengers. 14 wasn't wearing a seatbelt unlike the other two. 13 ended up flipping the vehicle and 14 was thrown from it and the ATV landed on him. They managed to get him to the hospital, but he had severe trauma and didn't survive. Scarred my friend for life. Wear seatbelts, please, people. They really do save lives. Story 24. An old classmate from high school, was class valedictorian, graduated top of her class, got into one of the top pre-med college programs. He later got his degree and his medical license. Last month, he got intoxicated, went to somebody's house, and fired at them. No reason either. He didn't know them. They didn't live near each other. They were just at home minding their own business. His trial hasn't started yet, but supposedly he will potentially get over 30 years at least. Story 25. A couple of days ago, a streamer had just quit his NVIDIA marketing job to co found a company with his famous streamer friends to do events for other streamers. 500,000 subs on YouTube. He built a good community where toxic behavior was instant ban. Then he alt-tabbed and accidentally showed an open tab with deepfake videos of other streamers, several of whom he knew personally. It was an absolutely brutal crap show. It's hard to think of doing much worse to your career short of committing actual crimes. He's no longer a content creator. He left the company, and in his apology, he says he's going to dedicate some time entirely to taking down these kinds of websites. He's also funding legal fees for the women affected against those platforms. Story 26. In my 5th grade class, this girl called me a pig, and because I can act, I start bawling my eyes out, and I exaggerated the whole story. Don't feel bad because she would pester other kids, but she was rich, so no one said anything about it. And she got expelled. This was a private school. And no matter how much money her parents offered, she got expelled and no other school would accept her because that looks very bad. So she ended up going to some bad public school that sucked worse than my private school that had mice, lol. She deserves it, and my school got canceled because of some reason. I wonder why. The school was terrible, not gonna lie. Story 27. I kissed a guy I just started dating and caught cold sores, which went on to break my immune system, activate multiple autoimmune disorders, activate weird medication and food allergies, and trigger a post-viral syndrome. I'm now disabled and a social pariah. Doctors can't fix it either, and because of the adult-onset immunodeficiencies, I can't go out because of the lockdown. Not that anyone has come near me in years to begin with because of the stigma of cold sores never going away and being herpes. If I could go back in time, I would punch myself in the face for this dumb decision. I ruined my chances for all kinds of relationships and a family over a stupid guy who ended up leaving me and blaming the disease he gave me. Story 28. I stood up. That was my mistake. Dropped something on the floor at work, and when I stood up, I whacked my head on something and gave myself a concussion. This was 2 days for my certification exam, which I flunked because I couldn't work on a computer. I then proceeded to muddle my way through the endless exhaustion and pain and poor mental health. It took me a year to recover, so I decided I'm finally going to try that test again. The company that runs the damn thing says I can't do the test if I don't fill out my Form X and make payment Y within 24 hours. Surprisingly, I didn't make it in time, so they didn't allow me to take the test, but it still counts as my second try at the flippin' test. Since it's been a year since I graduated, I have to take a competency test, which costs even more money. It's a whole crap show, and all because I stood up. Story 29. These kids I went to high school with, they were dropping rocks off of an overpass one day. One of them smashed through a car's windshield, severely injuring the woman in the passenger seat. Her family was in the car with her teenage daughter driving and her husband in the back seat, if I recall correctly. They left shortly after they threw that rock, but ended up getting caught because a couple of the kids drove back to the scene twice later that day, and the police ended up taking their license plate number. She ended up in the hospital for months and had multiple procedures done, but was rendered disabled due to the brain damage she sustained. She was a school teacher before the incident. The 4 boys all received multiple charges as they had apparently been on a trouble-making spree that day. 3 of them were minors, but I believe they were all tried as adults. To make matters worse, the woman's husband ended up ending it all a couple of years later. So their daughter essentially lost both of her parents because some kids threw a rock. Story 30. One of my high school friends. He was an athlete in our high school's varsity football team, state champions, ended up getting scholarships for his talent. We were both in JROTC. I was the battalion commander and he was my executive officer. Just a really great guy all around. And one day, he made the stupid decision to smoke in the high school bathroom and was caught. He lost all of his scholarships and never left town. A few years later, he was terminated in front of his young daughter. We weren't super close, but we were friends, and it makes my heart ache to this day whenever I think about him. Story 31. I was 14, my mom was sick in the bathroom and seemed to have a stomach bug because she was retching up. My dad was busy getting ready to go to work and told me to keep an eye on my mom. I brushed it off because I had homework and wanted to get on the computer to message my friends. 20 minutes or so later, he was about to head out the door when he asked me if she was doing okay. I said I hadn't checked yet, sighed, and made my way to the bathroom. And that's where we found her on the floor from a heart attack. I know it's not my fault that she passed away, but if I had just gone to check on her sooner or sat with her for a while, it's possible the paramedics could have gotten there in time to save her. My father ended up going kind of crazy after that, became cruel, and I moved in with a foster family. My life was absolutely forever changed by her passing. Story 32. Marrying my soon-to-be ex-husband. I got married too young, loved too much, trusted too much. Ended up dropping out of college to focus on marriage and work and finances at home, instead of securing an independent future that I had worked so hard for. Recently discovered he's been lying and cheating on me for the 5 of the past 7.5 years we've been married. It all came without any warning, had never had reason to believe he was dishonest or faithful. It all just came crashing down one day. I feel like I've completely wasted my 20s, college, and may never ever get a chance at having a family of my own at this point. I truly hate him for all of it, and he's messed up my life so badly. Story 33. I was dating my ex and was planning on spending the night one evening. He had his own place, and I live with my mom and dad. It sounds silly to say, but it's the truth, and what led me to go home that night, I was embarrassed about the way my skin looked without makeup on, acne, so I didn't want to sleep over. I made up some excuse and said I needed to go home. My mom had thought I was staying over there still, obviously, and by the time I got home, it was about 2 a.m. I walked to my room upstairs and found my mom cheating in the guest bedroom next to mine. I told her I knew the next day, and that's when my entire life changed. I told her she needed to tell my father, or I would. She decided to try and end herself instead, but luckily I found her car outside a hotel after driving around every single one for 3 hours in our neighborhood. She survived because I found her, but she then left my dad shortly after and has all completely destroyed him. He has a drinking problem and truly hates everything. She also has a drinking problem but is in a new serious relationship already. This all happened almost 2 years ago. I know if it hadn't been that night, it would have been just a different time she would have been caught. But I always wonder what would have happened if I had just stayed the night at my ex's instead of going home. I've been diagnosed with PTSD and an extreme anxiety disorder after all of this because the events of finding her both times has really screwed me up mentally. Sometimes I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her. Story 34. Trying to seek mental help directly through the Air Force, they claim it won't have a negative impact on your career, but they don't tell you that having depression on your record can and will very likely screw up your chances at better opportunities to advance in your military career. I lost 2 very promising jobs and was booted back to my old squadron solely because I was depressed at one point. I even had 3 different providers, including a mental health flight commander, all sign off memorandums stating that I was fine at the time. Now, I'm worse off than I ever was in the past with depression and anxiety, but I refuse to go back knowing that I might screw everything up even further than I already have, all just because I couldn't suck it up and figure my crap out like a normal, reasonable human being. I'm just a messed up waste of space that will never amount to anything useful. I can't even pass my goddamn PT test half of the time, and they're the easiest thing in the world. Now it's just better for me and everyone around me if I just shut up and hide and color when they tell me to. Story 35. 4 years ago, my mom decided to go on a trip to see my sister for her birthday. I got extremely ill right before she was going to leave, and I knew that if she found out, she would cancel all her plans and stay home for me. She had just gone through a rough divorce from my dad and had been clearly miserable and mistreated basically her entire life before that. I wanted her to have fun and enjoy herself for once, so I hid that I was sick. Big mistake, she passed away in a car crash on that trip, and I not only had to deal with her passing, but due to some legal loopholes and unusual circumstances, my extended family all but abandoned me, taking all her things with them, and I effectively became immediately homeless. Obviously, her passing wasn't my fault, but it's true that she would not have gone on that trip, and so would have not passed away if I just told her I was sick. That one choice I made and my entire life was ruined. I don't think I'll ever fully recover from the year that followed her passing. Story 36. I don't think it messed up my life, but I reached out to my biological father and we emailed each other back and forth for a few months. And he said that it would be best if his wife didn't find out because they tried for a baby and they couldn't have their own. And all of a sudden, he just cut all ties with me. He said that he never meant to abandon me or my mom. They had a one-night stand and he was already off to Marine boot camp long before my mom even realized she was pregnant. And by then, my mom was already dating the father who raised me. I will forever love my dad, but it kind of hurts knowing that my biological dad, who said he never abandoned me, kind of abandoned me and now wants nothing to do with me. I don't let it faze me too much, though. I have a father who loves me and raised me, and I'm very, very grateful for everything he's done for me, my mom, and my family. Story 37. I've known this woman for 15 years. I've been to her wedding. We went to college together. I helped get her a job in my field because she was a friend and seemed interested. Our lives go in different directions, although I always think of her because I was always secretly in love with her. Fast forward a few years, and she asks about a job opening at the department I work at. I convinced my boss to hire her. Things are going great, except my feelings are getting the best of me. I notice that she is starting to pick up on it, and it makes her uncomfortable. I feel terrible, so I figured the best thing to do would be to just confess. I know she doesn't feel the same way, but she's my friend, and although it will likely be humiliating for me and uncomfortable for her, our relationship will be better because we talked it out. So I confessed my feelings to her, and she says she had no idea. She is clearly uncomfortable with the conversation, so I apologize through tears and leave. The next day, I found out she went to HR. I was fired. Now I'm miserable at a job I hate with no friends. Story 38. Bought a new keyboard. Back in 1999, I bought a new keyboard for my PC as my old one broke. I didn't read the price correctly, and it left me with £245 less in the bank. My car payment was $258, and it bounced. They then tried to take it 3 more times before payday, and the bank canceled the direct debit to prevent charges. The next month, I didn't realize that the DD had been canceled and continued as normal. Month 3, and they came looking for the money. I made an arrangement with a nice lady from the finance company, and we filled in a direct debit form in her car, adding the missed payment plus charges and interest over the remainder of the loan. The bank refused to honor the direct debit, but I didn't find this out until 3 more months. Bear in mind that this was before internet banking, so I had no easy way of instantly checking my balance. We eventually got it sorted, but it really badly affected my credit rating, and I'm still recovering from it even now. Story 39. I dropped out of middle school when I was 13 due to depression, and even though I was lucky enough to be homeschooled until I graduated high school, I even managed to graduate a few months before everyone else. I feel like I'm going to have one hell of a culture shock once I go into the real world. Since I've been away from society for about 5 years, I turned 18 in August. By doing this, my social life is so bad that I literally only talk to 2 people, and it's slowly starting to become one person because they don't talk to me unless I talk to them. I'd do anything to go back in time, but sadly, that's not how it works. Story 40. It hasn't messed up my entire life, but I'll always remember this. I feel as though I played a part in my friend's passing. Me and my brother were hanging out with a friend of ours one day when our parents called to ask us to come home as we needed to go out. I told my friend to meet us at the park at a certain time, but we were held up and couldn't let him know. He instead went to another friend's house who was having a bonfire. We showed up just as a can of paint thinner was thrown onto the fire, exploded, and set 2 of my friends on fire. One of them later passed away. If I could have only let him know we wouldn't have made it, he might still be alive. Story 41. Had a choice of a baseball game or party. Wanted to go to the game, but made a promise to go to the party. Wasn't in the best of moods. Go to get a beer when a girl comes up to the keg. I hold out the tap to fill her up, and she says in a non-talkative way, "Thanks." I say, "You seem to want to be here as much as I do." She apologized, and we mentioned why we were there and why we didn't want to be. Ended up talking the whole time and got together with her friends later that evening. I spent every day together after that, dated, moved in together, got married, and had a son. 10 years to the day we met, she filed for divorce. Should have gone to the damn baseball game. So, the moral of the story here is always choose the baseball game. Unless the baseball game involves your ex, then definitely choose a party or just stay home. Story 42. Smoking, drinking, gambling. Started when I was 17 because I thought it looked cool. Quit for the last time at 32. It's been months since my last smoke. Stopped drinking heavily as well as it was a trigger. I never gamble anymore. I'm 32 and only really feel like my life is starting now. I got out of a relationship that revolved around smoking and drinking, moved back home after being out for 12 years to get my life back together. I've met and I'm dating a wonderful new girl. I have more money and control over my finances than I've ever had in my life. A new job, which I do not hate. Life is feeling more like it's worth living. I plan for my future now and like what I see. Smoking and excessive drinking and gambling will get you nowhere fast. You will pass away early and be broke. You don't need those things to have fun. Don't let them control your life. Story 43. When I was 16, I went to a sports physical to play baseball at school. After listening to my heart, the doctor stops and walks out of the room, then comes back a few minutes later with my dad. The doctor said he heard something weird and wants a cardiologist to look into it. A few months later, I found out that the cardiologist believes one of my valves is defective and more than a heart murmur, and a second opinion believed it was likely. I wanted to join the military like my father, uncles, and grandfathers. Cut to my mid-30s when I decided to get an echocardiogram since it had been a while, and I found out that the original diagnosis had been incorrect and my valve was fine. Story 44. I was friends with a girl I worked with. She came over for a barbecue and she kissed me. Come Monday, I told her that it was a mistake and shouldn't have happened and wouldn't happen again. She then found a way to convince HR I'd mistreated her, leading to my being let go. The most disappointing part was I wasn't even given a chance to defend myself even though I had text messages from her that spelled out what she was going to do. And how things went further, she dropped the entire thing. They didn't care. I've since been able to recover from all this, but it was not a fun few years all because I let her kiss me. Story 45. Lived in China, didn't take advantage of it, didn't learn the language. Now I'm back in the US with a decently paying job. But my whole life would be different if I could speak it. I work in manufacturing and sourcing. I could work anywhere if I just knew how to speak the language. With that being said, I was unnaturally bad at Mandarin. I have a slight speech impediment in English, can't say R's properly. I took therapy. It went away for the most part. It more just sounds like a slight accent now. So yeah, I took Mandarin classes and even minored in it, but the tones and sounds mix my own predisposition to be bad at languages. I was always one of the worst. I eventually just gave up. I did recently pick up Japanese. Although the grammar is definitely tricky, I'm glad I can actually say the language and they don't have the R sound, so I like it so far. Story 46. Accepting the job I had 2 jobs ago. Long story short, it was a bait and switch job, and because of the bait and switch and my refusal to lie on my resume, it effectively ended my IT career, but I moved to software development where I was freaking bait and switched yet again and stuck there for 5 long years, until finally breaking free into a non-bait and switch job that I started this past spring. The part that really screwed me up is the jobs paid so low that I couldn't afford to save. I couldn't afford to pack up and move, and I was slaving away 12 plus hours a day trying to keep my head above water. Now I'm in my late 30s trying to rebuild my savings and put more money into retirement. And before anyone asks why I didn't just leave, I couldn't. It was a literal trap, and I've already thought of every suggestion anyone can make. My only way out was pure luck, period. Story 47. Not leaving as soon as I saw the red flag and what would become a seriously cruel relationship. 3 months into the relationship, he hurt me so much I cried for days and I considered breaking up with him. But he seemed so remorseful for his actions, so I forgave him. The forgiveness gave him the ammunition to continue treating me like garbage. We broke up over a year ago now after I was put through some unimaginable things, and I'm still not quite right. I never really bounced back from the cruelty, and I just wish I had the courage to run for the hills as soon as I saw his true colors instead of believing his crocodile tears. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.